So that does raise a question about the extent to which the public actually accepts this. To an extent they do. So take your examples like enemy combatant. What's an enemy combatant? Well, actually one of them's coming up for trial. I think it may be the first trial from Guantanamo. It turns out it's a kid who was picked up as an enemy combatant when he was 15 years old because he did something, maybe threw a stone or did something or maybe shot or something an American soldier. Okay, so therefore we have to try him, maybe sentence him. You know, he's been in Guantanamo for years, and now who knows what will happen to him. Well, what kind of a framework is that? I mean, if the United States was invaded by Iran, let's say, and some 15-year-old kid tried to do something to the invaders, is he criminal? No. I mean, the framework, the conception is kind of like an outer space. Unfortunately, it's real. And what was the other term you used?
Enhanced interrogation.
Yeah, enhanced interrogation. This is another word for torture. Like, there's a huge fuss now about Guantanamo. Delegations are taken there by the Army to show how beautifully the prisoners are treated, and there's books and articles about is there torture and so on and so forth. It's all totally beside the point, entirely beside the point. As soon as you hear that those who are captured are taken to Guantanamo, you know it's a torture chamber. There's no other reason for sending them to Guantanamo. Why not send them to a security prison in New York, let's say? Okay, perfectly safe, they'll never get out, and so on. Well, the problem is if you send them to New York, automatically you start getting the whole civil rights system coming in. Do they have lawyers? Can they be tortured? Are they told the charges against them, and so on? You send them to Guantanamo, you can do anything you like. So therefore, as soon as we hear the word Guantanamo, we know it's torture chambers, without the investigations, without the inquiries, anything. And then you can ask a further question. Well, what's the U.S. doing in Guantanamo? I mean, actually, the reason they chose Guantanamo is because they can pretend that the U.S. doesn't have jurisdiction because it's in Cuba. Okay, so the courts don't have jurisdiction, and there's big debates about that. But the debates are ridiculous, of course. And what is the U.S. doing in Guantanamo in the first place? Well, it turns out, if you look back, that there's a treaty between the U.S. and Cuba, which Cuba signed at gunpoint. It was under military occupation, and the treaty hence has absolutely no validity by any standards you can think of. And the treaty allowed the United States to use Guantanamo, which is a big port, as a coaling station and for the Navy. Didn't say anything about keeping prisoners there. So we're violating the illegal treaty that we forced on Cuba. And in fact, why does the United States, leads to a further question, why does the U.S. hold on to Guantanamo altogether? Well, for one thing, it is a major port. You need a naval base for controlling the Caribbean and South America. But there's another reason. It prevents Cuban development. That means that the eastern end of the island is blocked from development. So if you want to strangle and destroy Cuba, which we've wanted to do since 1959, for reasons that are explained in the internal record, because of, and they go back to the Kennedy and Johnson administration, because of its successful defiance of U.S. principles going back to the Monroe Doctrine. No Russians. The Monroe Doctrine stated that we're going to run the hemisphere. That was the goal of the founding fathers. As I said, Jefferson, it's the nest, we're the nest from which we'll people the whole continent, getting rid of, the red men and the Spanish speakers. And Cuba is carrying out successful defiance of this, and that's intolerable. So therefore we have to seriously punish the people of Cuba, as we've been doing with terrorism, economic strangulation, and so on. Incidentally, in opposition to popular will here, a large percentage of the American population, it runs usually around 2/3, think we ought to enter into normal relations with Cuba. But holding on to Guantanamo is part of the strangulation of Cuba, ensuring that they can't develop the end of the island, which would be a base for trade with Europe, and so on and so forth. Well, all of these questions are the ones that would be in the headlines in a free press, and not whether this particular 15-year-old shot an American soldier invading his country. So yeah, there's a lot hidden behind the word enemy combatant. And in fact, you just take about almost any word of political discourse, you almost pick it at random, and it has two meanings. It has its literal meaning, and it has its doctrinal meaning. And the two have usually almost nothing to do with each other. So take, say, aggression, important term. It has a technical meaning. It was defined at the Nuremberg Tribunal, and that was then accepted internationally. And what it means is the obvious thing, sending military forces into another country, not at their request or something. Okay, that's aggression. And that's the term we use applied to anyone else. Like the Nazi war criminals, the primary reason they were hanged was because of the crime of aggression. And incidentally, which is defined more carefully. The Nuremberg Tribunal defines aggression as the supreme international crime, which differs from other crimes in that it encompasses all of the evil that follows. So the initial aggression in Iraq encompasses the sectarian warfare, the destruction of the antiquities, the millions of refugees, everything that happened since is encompassed in the initial act of aggression. Justice Jackson, the American justice at Nuremberg, gave a passionate declaration to the tribunal. He said that we're handing the defendants a poisoned chalice, and if we ever sip from it, meaning if we're ever guilty of the same crimes, we must suffer the same punishment, or else the whole trial is a farce. Okay? Again, those should be the headlines, except for one problem. The United States cannot commit aggression, by definition. We don't commit aggression. Take a look at the front page of the Wall Street Journal today, big lead article. Iran still, the U.S. claims Iran is still sending arms to Iraq. It may be true. Is Iran the only country sending arms to Iraq? Condoleezza Rice, a little while back, was asked on television, what's the solution to the Iraq problem? He said, simple. Just end the flow of foreign fighters and foreign arms, and then it's over. Nobody batted an eyelash, for a good reason. Our forces are not foreign. They're indigenous. Wherever they are, they're indigenous. If we invaded Canada, we would be there by right. And if a Canadian 15-year-old kid threw a stone at an American soldier, he'd be an enemy combatant and we'd send him to Guantanamo. And it follows from a very elementary principle. It's the one on which the country was founded. We're a nascent empire. Expansion is the path to security. We're indigenous everywhere. We own the world. So therefore, the questions can't be asked. And if you look at commentary and debate and discussion, you find that that's internalized. Nobody points to it. It's just part of our picture of the world, and that infects everything. That's why every term, like the terms you used, has, from an outside point of view, sounds like you're talking about a bunch of madmen.